Here we are. So to begin, it's really important to be clear what we mean by invasive non-native species. So a non-native species is a plant or animal that has been introduced to a new area by people. So we usually talk about them being introduced to Britain. And some examples of these are horse chestnut and wheat. So both of these are non-native species that have been introduced. Then some of these spread and have a harmful impact, and those are what we mean when we talk about invasive non-native species. So in the photo, this is an American mink. This is a serious predator of small mammals, birds, and other species. So we have over 2,000 non-native species established in Britain. Most of those are harmless, but around 10 to 15% become invasive. So non-native species are found in all environments. Most are terrestrial, so those are species that live on land, but freshwater and marine are still a significant problem as they are more likely to be invasive, particularly freshwater species. So around 60% of non-native freshwater species are invasive. They are a serious problem. So they're one of the top drivers of biodiversity loss worldwide. They play a key role in around 60% of global extinctions. Here in Britain, they threaten native wildlife and harm our natural ecosystems. They cost the global economy over $423 billion a year and around $2 billion a year in Britain. As I mentioned, freshwater species are particularly likely to be a problem. So some of these can survive out of water in damp conditions for a long time. They can be tiny and hard to spot, so easily moved around. And once they get into our waterways, they can very easily spread. A lot of our waterways are connected, so it's really easy for them to spread more widely. So to help protect the environment and reduce the impacts of invasive aquatic species, the Check Clean Dry campaign was launched in 2011 to give recreational water users simple guidance on how they can help. This is a great example of government, national governing bodies and environmental NGOs working together to protect our waterways. So I'm going to let our partners tell you more about the campaign and all of the amazing work that they are doing to support it. So first we have Dr. Emily Smith from the Angling Trust.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I have the hard task of going first. So yeah, I thought I'd just give a bit of a summary of why we are involved in this as a national governing body, why it is important to angling, but then also touch on some of the resources that are available for recreational users and clubs, and then some funding kind of available as well through the different organisations here today. So why are they important to us, the national governing body? How do they impact angling? So depending on the species, there's a plethora of different impacts that they can have. I've tried to group these together, but could go on for days on the different impacts because there's so many. But some of the key ones are around competition and predation. So this is where you have invasive species that are introduced that are directly kind of eating fish eggs or juveniles. You might be having species that outcompete fish populations. So this means they might be pushing out the juveniles from their habitats into the open water, so they're more easily going to be eaten by other species. They're competing for them for food, so their species, the fish species health declines. So that is just kind of one impact alone. Another one is around the impacts they can have on changing habitat. So a prime example of this are the thick mats that you can get created by species such as the invasive plant floating pennywort. So this stops light coming through to the water column below, so it reduces that light level, outcompetes native assemblages that die back. You lose that habitat structure, get decreases in oxygen and water quality, which is again really crucial for fish kind of in rivers and still waters. Another one that will impact anglers, but other recreational users as well, anyone enjoying waterways, is giant hogweed. So this has a direct impact on human health. Its sap is photosensitive. So that means if you brush against it, so you've got bare arms, bare skin, going along the bank, touch it, it then means it comes out in these horrible blisters and burns, and they can come back year on year. So that's something that we really don't want to be seeing. Again, all of these can have an impact on fish and fishing. We've had reports from our members and clubs of limited ability to access like really key kind of swims, so kind of fishing areas, inability to, or decreases in the type of fish they're having and their health, and resulting in temporary closures where they're having to manage these species. So obviously they have a real impact on angling. Next slide, please, Lucy. And a crucial thing is there's more knocking on the door. So obviously we have 275 species currently in the UK. However, there's many more kind of in Europe and other places around the world. And we all know with invasive species, the key thing is to try to stop them coming in the first place. So you've got an example here of round goby and also salmon fluke in Norway. So they're just some examples of species that we want to keep out. And that's why implementing measures that I'm going to come on to is so important. Next slide, please. And actually something that's I think really important to highlight is many of us going out and enjoying these landscapes and these waters might not realise that we could accidentally be spreading species from one place to another. So as Lucy kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of species have been found in research to survive for 14 days at least in damp kind of equipment and clothing. So thinking of paddle boards around to fishing kind of nets, anything like that. And for the fortunate ones, at least, many kind of recreational users are going out and using these water bodies at least once a fortnight. So within that time frame, that if they aren't doing and adopting appropriate measures, they could accidentally move things from one place to another. So that's something we want to try and encourage people to kind of get involved in and to stop where possible. Next slide, please, Lucy. And this is where the Check Clean Dry kind of campaign come in. So this kind of encompasses best practice measures that can be implemented by everybody and encourage clubs to get involved, encourage their members to adopt so they can stop species coming onto sites, but also being spread elsewhere. Lucy, next slide, please. So these are encompassed by 3 kind of key approaches. So it's exactly as you'd expect kind of on the tin, really, from the campaign name. So the first one is check. So making sure you're inspecting and like leaving plant material, mud, as much water as much you can at the water body before you leave that site. Next slide, please. Next one is clean. So this is making sure, again, if possible, doing it at the bank side, but thoroughly cleaning all of the equipment and boots and gear that you have that's come into contact with water. I've stated here that ideally use hot water, and the reason we encourage this is because hot water has been found to induce mortality in a wide variety of invasive species. If you don't have that, there are other options available, such as kind of cold water, high pressure to dislodge it, but it's just important to recognise you're not then killing that species, so to think of where that water could be going and containing it where possible. Next slide, please. And the final one is dry. So this is ideally using your kit out to dry for at least 48 hours in UV, so basically in sunlight. And why this is encouraged is if the first kind of 2 checks, 2 steps haven't worked for whatever reason, this is that final knock to make sure that you're kind of killing and decontaminating your kit. This is also important for diseases as well. To get fish diseases, you can kind of get invasive species kind of carry diseases, and these are really hard to spot. So really important that you implement all 3 of these steps. Next slide, please. So as the kind of national governing bodies and other kind of key stakeholders involved in this, we work with non-OCB Secretariat and others to try and translate this into materials that be useful for clubs and fisheries. These are available kind of in English and Welsh. So try to give some examples here, but some of these are around kind of visual prompts, so you can see the signs that we have available, so you can put these up at sites, trying to remind people coming to this waters to follow these steps. You can also get stickers that you can attach to kind of equipment. And also there are these really great kind of ID guides that talk you through key species that you might want to learn to ID, and also little leaflets as well. So a whole variety of resources that you can put up on notice boards directly kind of at the entrance to waterways, just to remind people of these steps and encourage them to follow them. Next slide, please. Alongside this, we've also tried to go further in giving direct kind of guidance and materials, and some of other materials will be coming on to later, but just to give a bit of a flavour of some of these, it can be creating videos to kind of talk through, to kind of check, clean, dry, and kind of show you how to implement them. Further videos kind of talking through how to identify certain species and how to report them, and also kind of using running webinars, but also using ambassadors, so kind of those people that people recognise in the sport, to get the message out there, so it's not just coming from us, but it's coming from other users as well. Next slide, please. And there's also some fantastic kind of funding opportunities now available around this. So from the Angling Trust side, we actually have our nets, mats and slings live round that went live today. So happy to kind of talk about that more kind of in the questions later if anyone's interested. But just to highlight that there is support out there for clubs and that are interested in trying to undertake work to manage invasive species training, or want to implement kind of facilities at their site. So then it means visitors can clean off all their equipment and gear before they leave that site. Next slide, please. And the final thing for me is just to highlight, this is from an angling kind of perspective, but we do some surveys every few years to try and get some intelligence and information on what impact the campaign is having. So since the launch of the campaign in 2011, the feedback we've had from anglers that have completed the survey has shown this increase in the number that are cleaning and drying kind of after every trip, so following check, clean, dry. So that's doubled kind of in that time period. So that's really encouraging for us to see, because obviously that is demonstrating to us that the community is getting behind this campaign and minimising its spread, so hopefully stopping these species that are harmful to the sport and the environment from being moved to different areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So next we have Richard Atkinson from Paddle UK.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. My name is Richard Atkinson, obviously. I'm the Access Environment Lead for Paddle UK. I lead on invasive species, working with external partners such as the Angling Trust and affiliated paddling clubs to help manage invasive species throughout England. I'm going to talk a little bit about event biosecurity, but first I'd like to talk about how invasive species impacts on paddle sports and events, etc. Firstly, it reduces the ability to access and enjoy waterways for sport and recreation. Not all invasive species have that impact, but there's one that is particularly harmful, and so what we need to do is to look at the access, the physical blocking of the waterways and the access points. What happened a couple of years ago, a certain invasive species, which come on to the next slide, impacted one of our Hassler events on the River Witham in Lincolnshire, and it had to cancel the event itself. It also slows down the flow of rivers, increases flood risk. Some takes up a channel capacity, forcing excess flood water to come out of the channel and impact on surrounding land. It also negatively impacts both our and the environment's health by reducing water quality. As I've just said, through slowing down the river's flows and increasing flooding, which increases flooding outside the channel, it leads to bank erosion and siltation. And within the siltation, there could be phosphates and nitrates, which will obviously increase invasive species growth. Next slide, please. So this is the paddler's number one enemy, floating pennywort. We're doing an awful lot around the country to try and control it, along with the Environment Agency, CRT, and other NGOs. It can go, given the right conditions, 20 centimetres a day, which is phenomenal. It clogs waterways, preventing paddling, angling, rowing, and sailing. It crowds out native species. It literally blocks out the lights, reduces the oxygen, and it just kills everything underneath it. Sometimes it can be mistaken as solid ground, which is pretty amazing. And as you can see, this looks like solid ground. And it can be really harmful to animals. We've had cows, we've had sheep, we've had deer, and we've even had a couple of postmen that have fallen into it as well, which is rather unfortunate. Next slide, please. So how are they actually spread? I'm talking about kayaks, stand-up paddle boards, and canoes here. A lot of the invasive species can just sit in damp conditions, such as buoyancy aids, throw ropes, etc. Any areas that are pulled up with water can be transferred, can transfer invasive species. So it's really a real it's really important to look into the darker areas of your canoe where you can't reach. On the right hand side we have a sample of, I believe, I'm not sure what it is, to be honest with you, but of a fragment of plants that's been found in the kayak and then moved elsewhere. Next slide, please. So biosecurity events. Why is the risk higher at events? Participants can travel from other areas. They can travel from abroad. They can bring new species not found in the UK. Larger numbers of participants mean that it's increased introduction of the risk. Different levels of background knowledge and behaviour. Some participants might not be a member of a club, so they might not be aware of check, clean, dry and invasive species. And this applies to rowing, angling and paddle sports. Next slide, please. So if we're looking at larger events, I'm working closely with the disciplines such as national slalom, whitewater racing, sprint events, etc., sprint committees. I'm working recently with the slalom committee to produce guidance, to pre-event guidance, which we send out to competitors before any large event. Also, we've included check, clean, dry guidance to the National Sprint Handbook. So we've got to make it sure it's visible, and it's got to be on the front pages and it's prominent, so people pick up on it, as well as things like safety and competition rules and stuff. It's got to be at the forefront of any information. Provide information in pre-event guidance, as I said. I think it's really important to place signage, banners and washdown facilities at venues. There's a great deal of resources available from Animal Plant Health Agency, such as banners, signage, etc. And I think it's also really important to recruit volunteers to lead on any event biosecurity. Somebody has to lead it from the front. So I think a champion who actually plans, raises awareness, runs the event and reviews the event is really important. We also have documents and training available. The document here is a little bit out of date because we're now Paddle UK, but it's all very relevant, and it deals with planning on different levels of events. It raises awareness of invasive species. It tells you how to run different levels of events as well, because sometimes you need resources for larger events than smaller events. And it also lets you look at reviewing the event you've just had, so you can improve on it for next time. Next slide, please. So what can I do to help if you're running a club event and you're getting people onto your home waters? So I think it's really important to educate members and visitors. For example, display check, clean, dry signs at the entrance and exit points to the water. Ask visitors to follow check, clean, dry before arriving and leaving the water. give out check, clean, dry materials and promote newsletters. If you've got a club newsletter, put it within that. And again, nominate a biosecurity champion to do all the above. It's really important to have a single person to run each event. Next slide, please. And finally, help members of business check, clean, dry. A few ideas here: install cleaning facilities if available, if you've got water supply, etc. Provide kit rather than bringing their own personal kit in. If you provide kit for them, it means that you know it's been checked, clean, dried, rather than people saying, yes, I've done it. So if you can do that, it's practical to do that, that's brilliant. Try and promote it through waterproof stickers. We've got lots of check, clean, dry stickers we can put on boats, kayaks, etc., stand-up paddle boards. And if you've got time, ask visitors to log in and log out, confirming they have cleaned and inspected their kit. This can be quite simple, but I can understand if there's a major event for the club, it might be more difficult. But if you can do this, that'd be brilliant. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you, Richard. So next we have Rachel Delay from British Rowing.
Thanks, Lucy. And Richard, quite a bit of what I'm going to say, funnily enough, overlaps with what's been said already. And as some of you might know, we formed a Clean Water Sports Alliance where we're doing just that, i.e. working together, because lots of organisations have expertise in slightly different areas, and we're fairly new to this world, I would say, in terms of NGB land. So we are learning a lot from RYA angling and paddle. So the impact on rowing events and clubs, this is in terms of floating pennywort especially. This is just a picture of a cleaning station at our Club Champs event that was at Home Pierpont in the summer, kind of facilitated with the help of Lucy and the Animal and Plant Health Agency. But floating pennywort in about 5 or 6 of our clubs is actually stopping people getting out on the water. You saw from the slide earlier and Richard's description that, you know, it's like so you just physically can't actually get out on it or do anything. So not only is it actually impacting people being able to take part, but also we did a survey, our club survey, and we know that 9 events in the last 3 years were cancelled due to this. And often the events, they're quite small events usually the clubs run, but that's an extra revenue, say to buy a new boat or something like that. You know, it might generate between say £1,000 or £6,000 for the slightly bigger ones. And so when they start losing that revenue because of this particular invasive species, you know, that starts to have a huge impact on their ability to thrive as a club. So that's both impacting participation on the sport and financial implications as well. Thanks, Lucy. Next slide. Again, similar to the other organisations have facilitated through Animal Plant Health Agency. I'm not sure if any of you are from rowing clubs or rowers here, but we have a stock of resources similarly to what Rich described in terms of identifying some of the invasive species, so quagga mussel as well and killer shrimp we see now and again. We're also promoting the check, clean, dry at our events. There's a lovely description, Kate, this is sort of slightly stealing your thunder maybe, that I've heard of the Olympics with the sailors from New Zealand, because it's so ingrained in their kind of DNA and culture as to how they work as a nation and then as a sport, that they would ask to leave the Olympic sailing village in Weymouth because they were cleaning their boats with toothbrush. So that's how much care that they were taking, and that's kind of the end point to where we want to get. So it becomes ingrained in our kind of culture and our kind of daily activities. So there's a lot of education to be done, and this is what we're starting to do now. But we have some aluminium signs, and we have some leaflets and stuff we put in clubs and by waterways. So please do just ask if any of you are from the rowing community on this call. Thanks, Lucy. Next. So again, this is this example of working together, really. I mean, this is with paddle through our Thriving Water scheme that was kind of on a slide earlier. This is a scheme that we launched last year. We will be launching later this year to clean up our waterways, looking at water quality, plastics, but also invasive species. And through that, we were able to fund somebody called Pippa Rowlandson, Rich, who's great, isn't she, and leads all these, also some of these great paddle cleanups. This is a picture of one. So it's working with volunteers, and the more we can work together, joined up with canoeing and sailing and rowing and other community groups, the better, to physically sort of starting to remove this weed. Now is the time that it's beginning to kind of spring up and can cause devastation. Our fund also helped buy some equipment like at Northwich Club, for example, and they're clipping the weed away. So there's one, or there are two coming up on the River Lee. I don't know if you can see there on the 15th and 17th of May, but that's a chance to actually sort of get physical and start cleaning up the weed yourself. I don't think we have Ian on the call from Broxbourne Rowing Club, but he tells a story where I think it was a couple of years ago, he just saw one of the little floating blues and just ignored it because it didn't really mean anything, you know, at that point. You know, then lo and behold, a few months later, you know, he's got the beginnings of this carpet forming outside his club. So he's always a big advocate of raising awareness, so you know what to look out for, because prevention is better than cure, as the saying goes. So that's everything, I think, Lucy, from me. Thank you. Handing over.
That's great. Thank you, Rachel. So last but by no means least, we have Kate Fortnam from the RYA and the Green Blue.
Hi everybody. Yeah, thanks Emily, Rachel and Richard. You can see that we're all working together and produce some great, fantastic resources. So if any of you are from the sailing community, all the metal signs, posters, which we've all sort of co-branded and brought together are available to you, and you can go on the Green Blue website and access that. And it looks like Lucy's just put up a QR code where all of our resources are collated into one web page on the non-native species website. So do go and have a look, find your particular sport, and you can click on that and download or request specific resources in hard copy. We also have some great video footage. So from our perspective at the RWay, we've been working on the Check Clean Dry campaign for probably 20 odd years now, and particularly on inland waters, as Lucy explained earlier, that's where most of the invasive species impacts are, but also on our marine waters. So it's not just inland, it is marine, but what we found over the years is coastal clubs or saltwater based are washing their boats down a lot, but that's to remove the salt. So they're already doing the best practice, but maybe not as aware of the invasive species that are in their local waters. And then on inland waters, they're less practiced at washing their craft and equipment down because it's fresh water and doesn't have that impact. So having that awareness on the inland waters is where we've done a lot of target for this campaign and have had success. But there's still a lot of clubs out there that still don't have the Check Clean Dry signs out. This is your opportunity as an individual participant to get your club involved. And that brings me on nicely, because I think it's really important to have case studies, as Rachel mentioned with the rowing club before, of actually how do these invasive species impact on our activities and what can we positively do to try and, I suppose, control once these invasive species do arrive in our waters. And on the webinar, we have Mark Rushton, who's the Commodore of Grafton Water Sailing Club, and they discovered an invasive species. And we've just recently done a video, and here we're going to have the premiere of that video to give you an idea of what that case study is. And afterwards, I will pop a link in so you can access the full video, so you can share with others as well.
Okay, can everybody see the video?
Yeah.
Yes, good.
there are over 2,000 non-native species in Britain, and they've been introduced naturally and by human activity. Of these, 10 to 15% are invasive species, and this means they cause harm to wildlife and the environment, but also to human health and our activities. Once these invasive species establish, it's really hard to eradicate them and control, and can cost a lot of money. Some of the negative impacts of these species include outcompeting our native wildlife for space, food, and light, but also they can introduce disease. Specifically around boating, it can block our inland waterways, preventing us from navigating through, and it can also increase biofouling on the hull of our vessels, our infrastructure. The other issue is it can cause risk of suspending boating activities on our inland waterways, and this is exactly what's happened with some of our sailing clubs. An example location of where an invasive species has been discovered on our sailing waters is Grafham Water. And the Environment Agency discovered this species along with the landlord, and they were working with the sailing club to encourage them to put in place biosecurity measures to prevent that invasive species leaving the site, but also new ones arriving, because they felt that sailing activities had contributed towards these invasive species arriving at this water body.
In 2010, we were the unfortunate people who got to be the first club to get an infestation of killer shrimp. The first thing that happened was all sailing stopped for a couple of weeks whilst we worked with Anglian Water to find out what we should do to try and prevent the further spread of the killer shrimp around the country. In that time, you weren't allowed to take your boat off the site in case it was infected, and that meant that not only could we not sail here, we also couldn't sail anywhere else with our boats. So it reduced some of the club's revenue for a few weeks whilst we worked out what we needed to do. And then with Anglian Water's help, they helped us fund this sort of large concrete area that you can see behind me, and these water bowsers that allow us to connect a lot of pressure washers to allow us to pressure wash the dinghies as they come off the water if they're going to leave the club. We need to encourage people to understand that it's not just our problem. We happen to have the killer shrimp, but there are plenty more invasive species out there, and any one of these can cause a significant headache for your club. Cleaning the boats off, it takes 2-3 minutes to clean each boat, which isn't really very long compared to the amount of time it will take your club to sort out an invasive species if you bring it from Grafham to your club.
As you can see, Grafham Water Sailing Club have put in biosecurity measures to help their members and visiting sailors wash down their equipment and boats to prevent the species leaving or arriving at their site. We want to prevent this happening at other sailing clubs across the UK, and we encourage you therefore to put in place biosecurity measures to help your sailors to check, clean and dry their boats and equipment to prevent the spread of invasive species. Okay. So that's just an example of the kind of materials, video content that we're trying to produce to support you as our members, but the wider boating, angling and paddle sports and rowing community. So if there is any resources that you feel that you do need, then we welcome you getting in touch with us because we want to work with you to produce things that are going to be effective. But we hope that developing case studies of individuals who are doing the check, clean, dry procedure and clubs is going to give you a clearer picture and help inspire you to follow suit as well. And we do have Mark on the webinar to answer any questions. So if you are a club and want to know anything specific around what they had to go through and you want to delve in a bit more, then he is on the call today as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kate. Yeah, we have some time for questions now. I've seen a couple come into the chat already, but if you do have questions, then please keep adding them there. So the first one, which, the first is asking if the campaigns include recommendations for disinfection. So as well as invasive species, there are a number of waterborne diseases affecting amphibians, especially chytrid fungus. Burcon is the standard disinfectant recommended for this. They said for all they know there may be fish diseases too, but it's not their area. So from our side, Disinfection isn't effective against invasive species, so we would always recommend to check clean and dry to make sure that you are removing invasive species. There are some circumstances where disinfection is useful as well, but it's a kind of add-on to the campaign rather than being a main part of it. Emily, I can see you nodding. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so it's definitely something we worked on. I know the Environment Agency are doing it too. We're almost doing like check, clean, dry, disinfect. So recognising exactly as though we have kind of fish diseases that we really want to kind of stop being spreading from one place to another. But yeah, the recognising that we kind of advocate it as an additional kind of measure rather than a replacement of check, clean, dry. So kind of incorporating that practice there.
Great. And somebody else saying that a non-native species is specifically introduced by people. What would you call an invasive species that has naturally migrated due to climate change or other factors? So we, with invasive non-native species, we're just concerned about species that are introduced by people. So obviously there are some species which might naturally migrate, but they wouldn't be considered non-native. See any other questions? Yeah, one here. What, if any, research or action is being taken to eradicate invasive species? Which is a good question. There's a lot of work going on around invasive species. So we have a GB strategy on invasive species, and that covers prevention, rapid response, all the way up to long-term management. Once invasive species are introduced, it is quite difficult if they're widespread to actually eradicate them. There's quite a lot of work going on, particularly with local action groups around kind of managing widely sort of established species. But yeah, it's definitely much easier to focus on preventing kind of the next wave. Emily, I can see you nodding again. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I can say that. So there are some species where they are like a national kind of priority. So from an angling perspective, you have topmouth gudgeon, so it's an invasive fish species, and there's also water primrose. So these are ones where there's some kind of national work being done because they're only in a limited number of sites. I say that they are making progress with those species, but actually you get kind of one or two new sites kind of being found every year. So obviously that kind of adds to that churn of management and ongoing costs. When it starts getting to kind of river systems in particular, and obviously you think of coasts and marine areas as well, trying to contain species kind of in those environments and then trying to kind of use the word eradicate is really, really hard. So we always use the term kind of control, and it's all about minimizing the spread and then minimizing the impact they're going to have on that environment, but also on the recreational activity. So everyone kind of on this call today, and it was kind of a lead to in the slides, we've got behind this kind of national strategy for floating pennywort. So that's a species that kind of showed the impacts of it earlier. So this is trying to bring together kind of all the resources and expertise that we have kind of in this room, but also more broadly from government, different departments and different stakeholders to try and work strategically to manage these species, because it's really important as well. If you think of how interconnected these systems are, from a river perspective, you want to start kind of managing at the top of the kind of catchment at the source rather than part way down, because you could do some amazing work to try and get rid of it and then it could just get invaded again from upstream. So they are really challenging, and that's why kind of check, clean, dry and trying to stop things getting in the first place is so important. There are definitely strategies out there to manage them when they're in place, and that's some of the work that we do. But yeah, that's almost like a kind of second tier to the prevention kind of messaging.
Yeah, Kate, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say about because in terms of action being taken by our communities, you guys obviously do a survey and have done one sort of asking, you know, what are clubs doing, but also what individuals are doing. And that's where Emily shared some data earlier on to kind of express who is cleaning, who is drying, what facilities, how many clubs. And I think on an individual level in terms of NGBs, we'll take log of, you know, which clubs, how many resources are going out and where they're located. But also from that perspective, doing our own sort of individual surveys and logging that information to determine, you know, to what extent are the boating community, for example, adopting best practice and looking for ways of improving that and supporting. But you might be able to explain a little bit more, Lucy, about that kind of overarching survey that's done to collect data.
Yes, this was done, the last survey in, I think it was 2018. This is kind of every 10 years. It's like a bigger version almost of what Emily's doing specific for anglers. So we kind of look at lots of different aspects of invasive species, different sort of audiences and groups. But yeah, last time we did it, we included anglers and boaters, kind of generally sort of looking at like their awareness of invasive species, what they're actually doing when they leave the water. And we should be repeating that in probably the next couple of years. So it'll be really interesting to see how things have changed. Last time, it was the second time that we'd done it, and things had definitely improved awareness and understanding. So it sort of followed what Emily had found with angling as well, which is definitely encouraging. Richard, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just think the key to this, and the elephant in the room, is resources. We need extra resources to actually carry out the work we do with volunteers, and it's got to be coordinated with the NGOs and the statutory organisations such as the EA, CRT, and what have you. We're succeeding in certain areas, but not in others. So we're working in these Midlands, West Midlands, the North, Thames, etc. But I think there's got to be that coordinated approach to tackling invasive species, especially floating pennywort. But as I say, we do need that backing from government, DEFRA, etc., to provide those resources at the end of the day.
Thanks, Richard. So we have some other questions here. So someone is asking, for university sport clubs, are there any additional strategies we should carry out other than check, clean, dry? I wondered if you wanted to take this one, Kate. I know you've done a lot of work with university sort of sailing clubs.
Yeah, obviously with university clubs, they're going to be utilised. Sorry, we got an alarm.
Perfectly timed.
Go on to the next question, maybe.
Okay, we'll come back to that one. There's one here. Do you think check, clean, dry information could be included with the sale of water sports equipment? Do you know if this is happening already, or do you think it is achievable? So, I mean, we definitely agree with this one, and it's something we're sort of trying to pursue. Emily, do you want to add?
So it's not, from an angling perspective, it's not water sports equipment. I would definitely agree, and it's something that we have approached the kind of tackle kind of manufacturers to have kind of conversations on this. That's why I think for us, the stickers, we kind of encourage them to kind of put it on their boxes and things like that. But actually, you used to be able to get a physical kind of rod license, and it was check, clean, dry on the back of that. So now, sadly, that's you don't get a physical copy because of that prompt, but it's something that we can continue to kind of do. But yeah, completely agree. It'd be great kind of if it was embedded in equipment, just as that ongoing reminder when you're out of what steps you should follow.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Richard.
No, just to add on to that, all our new membership that joins Paddle UK get information about check, clean, dry, which I think is really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, I'm guessing you're still in the middle of an alarm. I'll let you. Oh,
we're safe.
Oh, you're safe. Brilliant. Okay, we can come back to the university sport club question then, if you like.
That was just a warning. Invasive species have arrived. Wake you all up. So yeah, in terms of the university side of things, obviously you're going to be sailing or rowing at a venue, for example, or paddling. And it's about encouraging them to make sure that they've got facilities in place, which might be, as we said, as basic as hose pipes with tap water that you can wash all your equipment down. And yes, in terms of following the check, clean, dry, if you are utilising a venue, that's what you need to just follow it and adopt it. And what's powerful is if you're doing it, other boaters will ask you, why are you doing that? And it's that kind of ripple effect. Events I have been to where we've been putting in place check, clean, dry, I've stood there with a hose pipe and watch boats come off the water and seeing if they'll stop and wash their boats, and then they'll stop and go, oh, are you doing stuff around invasive species? And like, yep. Do we need to wash our boats down? Yep. So it's that kind of encouragement, whereas sometimes boaters especially on inland waters, where even if they feel they're going to be leaving their boat at that venue, they feel there's no need to wash it down. But by doing it as a club, and if you have visiting boats coming along, you're demonstrating that best practice. Even if you're not going to move your boat anywhere else, you're showing it visually. And that is really empowering, because if another boater who is a visitor comes off the water and doesn't see you washing down, they may possibly just walk past and not do that. So from the university's perspective, I think talk to your clubs, get them involved, make them aware of the resources that we've shared today, and make sure that they're implementing that and then following that best practice at your own venue, but also when you go and do events elsewhere. And what we've tried to do at the RWA, we've got the University Sailing Sustainability Challenge, where universities across the UK can get involved, and that's undertaking sustainable actions throughout the academic year. But as part of that, it is invasive species prevention. And what we do is we encourage clubs to put in biosecurity at their venues and at their events where they're hosting other clubs visiting. And then when they're going to go to another club, making sure they're washing down their boats and equipment before they leave, and then also at that venue before they come back. So again, it's just this showing by example, talking about it, demonstrating has a massive powerful effect, because not everyone's going to come onto this webinar and get this information, whereas you guys are going to go back out into your communities, your clubs, and that's where the power is of you being ambassadors for us.
Thanks, Kate. Richard.
Yeah, just following up to what Kate was saying, we had contractors from the Wildlife Trust clean down kit at a number of big events at the Water Sports Centre in Nottingham, and for 2 or 3 years it took us a long time to get people to do it, and it's a bit like is Pavlov's dog the right terminology, but it by the end of the 2 or 3 years before COVID, they automatically came up and washed their boats up. But then COVID came along and it seemed to be forgotten about. But I think we just need to put the effort into doing biosecurity at certain events, which will, automatically get them to wash down the boats. But it does take time though.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Emily.
I don't know if it's relevant or not, but as in just something that we also encourage alongside this as an additional strategy is if you're going away for a weekend and you might be visiting kind of several sites, which is often what can kind of happen from an angling side and might happen for other kind of groups, is also, if possible, you can look up. So there's a website you can look up and see what invasive species might be present in that water. So obviously, if you've got something set in your mind and you have to do something a certain way and visit, then fair enough. Actually, there's flexibility. If you look and you can go to the places that have maybe not got any reported species, invasive species first, and then go to the other ones, particularly where you might be going to one place to another. It just means that then you'll be reducing that risk, because hopefully you're visiting don't want to be cleaner, but the uninvaded sites first, and then leaving the invaded one to the end. That's just an additional kind of thing you could use alongside Check Clean Dry if you do have flexibility and you're planning kind of a multiple kind of day and multiple site trip.
Richard, did you have anything to add as well?
I totally agree with what Emily said. The biggest question we get every time is, what if we're going to one catchment to another catchment to another catchment? And it's I say it's the most common question we have, and I'd agree with what Emily's saying.
Yeah, great. Okay, we have a few more questions. We've got a few minutes left. Yeah, one here about drying equipment. So it can be tricky to do this thoroughly in the damp British weather. Does anyone have any tips and tricks for individuals travelling from domestic homes?
Yeah, as in, I think from me, as in, one, I understand it's that feeling you want it to feel dry, but actually from a UV perspective, the British weather is the British weather. But even if it's a bit cloudy, I think it can still have that benefit. But yeah, I think it's just trying to kind of take advantage of that where you can, and obviously you can try and kind of dry it kind of inside. It's the UV where possible is just for the disease kind of perspective in particular. Something that we also recommend and are trying to do, again, through that net, mats and sling kind of round I mentioned earlier, is to fund kind of clubs and be able to get them to purchase nets, mats and slings that can then stay on site. So this means that visitors and members that are coming to use those facilities use those high risk pieces of kit, and they stay at that site when then they leave. So that then helps, again, it's another strategy to try and stop the spread, because the kit that we're really concerned about is not moving from one site to another. So obviously, yeah, I don't know about kind of Rachel's kind of background there, but from our side, that's another approach you could use if some of the kit is staying, or boats or whatever is staying on site, and obviously then it's you're not having to come to implement it to the same degree compared to if it's going elsewhere. Don't know if that's helpful or not.
That's good. Kate, anything to add?
Yeah, from the sailing perspective, going back to the universities, they're quite good actually, because they do use the same class of boat, and then the club will usually have a fleet of those, and they won't necessarily always take their own boats, which is great. Where you're going up to higher level sailing, people will want their own boats because they've rigged it specifically to how they need it, so it gets a little bit more complex. But in terms of the drying, yeah, I mean, if you're thoroughly washing, getting into all those nooks and crannies, washing it out, and then tilting your boat, draining all the water out wherever possible, leaving it to air dry. So if you are going to go back into the club, get changed, leave it to the last minute to put the cover over the boat, and leaving it out in UV lights, yeah, minimises the survival rate. But they're that air drying. And if you do have a towel, I do rowing as well. We towel down our rowing boats afterwards and wash them thoroughly. So that is an option. I know you can't get into absolutely everywhere, but going back to what we mentioned earlier, it's about minimizing this risk. You know, it's going to be very hard to eradicate it completely, but minimizing is really important. And another aspect on the kind of pristine waters, we do have some clubs that come back and say, well, we don't have any invasive species, so we don't need to do it. You don't know you don't have them until they get to a population size where they can be identified by the Environment Agency, or you can visually see the impact. By then it is too late. And if you do have pristine waters, you want to keep them pristine. So you want to make sure your members who are going elsewhere or visitors coming in are doing the check, clean, dry, because you don't want those invasive species arriving. So just to get around some of those reasonings that some boaters and some clubs come back with.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. One here, does anyone have any recommendations of portable pressure washers for things like stand-up paddleboards, kayaks and canoes? Richard?
Yeah, we use battery operated jet washers. Trying to think what the make is, but there's different makes at Karcher and what have you. So you can I think a battery lasts for several hours, and it's portable. I suppose the issue is water supply. If you're in a remote area, it's difficult to find any clean water, which you need before you spray it down. So I think with these battery operated ones, they don't take too much water. But if you can put it's not a Bowser, but just a large container in the back of your vehicle, and fill it up and then take it around with you. I know it's another thing to do, isn't it? When you want to go out, paddling, and it's another pain in the butt to do. But yeah, I say that the small operated battery powered jet washer does the job.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Richard. Emily, this is one for you. Sorry, Mark, did you want to add to that point?
Yes, I was just saying at Grapham, we also use the battery operated pressure washers now. I'm afraid I also can't remember precisely which brand that was. And I think prior to that, we used some petrol powered ones, but they were rather higher upkeep. And they're good for a big event, but actually the battery electric ones are just much more convenient. Though, as you've seen, we've got these big Bowsers so that we can have a
large supply of clean water and clean a lot of boats at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's a great example of biosecurity at Grafham. Thank you, Mark. Possibly final question. Emily, do you ask anglers to not use non-native species as bait? So this is thinking about the bait itself, whether it's fresh or live, potentially eggs attached, and bait packaging, spreading invasive species, or the potential for it to do that.
Yeah, as in, so when the Angling Pathway Action Plan was created in 2019, actually there was a bit of work that looked into this because there's something about whether we should explore this, and we weren't really sure of how much risk kind of bait would pose. So that work was done by CFAS. I was trying to sneakily see if I could find it. Sadly, I can't. If I can, I'm happily to try and dig it out and send it around afterwards. So I think the result of that, and also because of us kind of leaving the EU as well, some of the bait that we would have imported traditionally in the past, a lot of that has been kind of made a lot stricter, but a lot of the information that we've kind of had from people is one, yeah, we share that information and discourage it, but actually it didn't seem to be a very kind of popular kind of activity. I think a little bit more in a marine space where people might be kind of collecting stuff and maybe we're moving from one place to another. So it's definitely something we do some comms around. But yeah, I think traditionally now, I think a lot of it seems to be kind of dried, or you know, you're kind of using magnets and stuff from local suppliers, or they're not kind of what we would class as an invasive species. They're just kind of non-native or native species. But yeah, it's definitely something that we keep an eye on and continue to do some work around, because it's very important kind of additional kind of consideration for us as a national governing body and as a community.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Okay, I think that's all we have time for. If anyone else has any burning questions, then you can send them to the Secretariat. I'll put our contact details in the chat box and we'll try and get those answered to you. You can visit our website to find out more about Invasive Species Week and the other webinars we're running this week. But I just want to say a huge thank you to our speakers for taking part in the webinar today, for suggesting this in the first place as a topic for this week, and for all of the amazing work that they're doing all year round to raise awareness of invasive species and on biosecurity. So thank you all, and thank you everyone for joining.